Gute Woche and welcome to tonight's shiur, Motzei Shabbos, Parshas Shmos, and also we're just coming from the yard site of the Alter Rebbe, which was on Friday of Daled Tevis. So we'll start off with something from the Alter Rebbe, and that is if we're following a Kiddush of the Alter Rebbe. Now we're going to discuss two dinim. One is about Kiddush b'mokim su'uda, and the second one, which is related to that, as we'll see, about the idea of Hadlochas Neiris and Kabbalas Shabbos close to Hadlochas Neiris. So let's start off with the concept of Kiddush b'mokim su'uda. So we have a halacha that when you make Kiddush, it should be b'mokim su'uda b'karosa Shabbos oineg. So by the place where you Karoso, it should be b'mokim oineg. It should be where you're having your food for Shabbos. And here we have in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, tzorich lechol b'mokim haKiddush le'alter acha haKiddush. One should be eating where you make Kiddush. You should be eating le'alter, promptly. If you didn't eat until later, le'yotzi rechivase, you're not yotze. And he adds even more. Ve'ein chiluk ben zman kotzar lezman orech. It doesn't matter a short interval or a long interval. So this is very interesting. So what's the limit to this? You have to, is it in seconds? How does it work? So Reb Chaim Noah in Ksos HaShulchan in Siman Pei Aleph, so he quotes the Alter Rebbe's words, Alter, and then he adds the following. In his Ha'oros, he called his Ha'oros Badei HaShulchan. Okay. Upon him, he writes the following. It seems to me that there mustn't be even the slightest interval. So therefore he comes up with a svara. That if it's within a window, let's say 4 minutes, whatever it is, 9 minutes, which is, as we know, that this is particularly relevant to us, the night of Pesach, say the night, and Yom Kippur for someone who has to eat. There's a certain window, which is called Kedei Achilas Pras. And whatever is eaten within that window is considered a single unit. And if it's spread out more than this window, it's not considered one achila. So on Pesach by night, we want to eat the kazayas matzah. So we make sure to have the kazayas within the window. So we make a window of 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Machmir that way. Comes Yom Kippur, if someone unfortunately has to eat, so if possible, we try to make that he eats in small amounts with intervals. In this way, that they don't eat within this window, so they're not in violation of eating Yom Kippur, Kesebes and Yom Kippur. So the concept of Kedei Achilas Pras is that it's a window of time, and whatever is eaten within that window of time is considered a single unit of eating. So Reb Chaim Noah curiously wants to import the concept of Kedei Achilas Pras and apply it over here. So here you've got Kiddush, b'mokim suda, two separate things, and there's a halacha that they have to be close to one another. And he is importing the svara of Kedei Achilas Pras, which I find unconvincing, because what's got one to do with the other? That's got to do. There is a din of it should be achila achas. It should be considered a single achila. Here we're talking about two activities, Kiddush and the Suda, that they should be near one another. And so he introduces this svara. He raises the question. He introduces the svara of Dichias Pras. Yosim is at Tzorach Iyun. Then he quotes from the Sharit Shuva, who brings from a sefer called Ginas Varadim, who wants to say that so long as you still feel the pleasure of the drink of the kos, it's still considered close by. All right, so that's that. He leaves it unclear, and we say Kiddush b'mokim suda. Now it is very valuable to look at the last two lines here. The Mishnah Brura says that if the hefsek was for necessary for the Suda. That's not called a hefsek. So therefore, with these words of the Mishnah Berurah, this discussion is more academic than practical. So let's say it takes time. You have a big family, Baruch Hashem. So it takes time till everyone washes, etc. So till you manage to make hamoitzi, it's going to take some time. But that's all a tzarech hasuda. That's not a problem. For most of us, when we come home, most of us are really we want to make kiddush and have the meal as soon as possible. We're not going to hang around doing nothing or whatever other activities which are not related to the meal. So I'm saying it's a little bit academic because most of us we make kiddush and we make hamoitzi ASAP. So here's talking about taking a break between kiddush and the meal, not l'tzarech hasuda. I say that's an unusual thing. But meanwhile, that's why I say it's academic. But still, what's the shiur? If you wanted to take a break between Kiddush and Hamoitzi, what is the shiur in Zman, in time? So now we have a halacha which we have discussed probably several times, but it's a common question about a woman who wants to light Neres Shabbos, and for some reason she doesn't want to be Mekabel Shabbos right away. It could be because she hasn't davened mincha. It could be because I had the case more than once. A woman on something Erev Yom Kippur. And we live about. For her, she was really getting on. It would be, let's say, a 20-minute walk to go to shul. So instead of walking there and back, so she wants to light Neres before Yom Kippur Altai, and then her husband would drive, or she would drive, doesn't matter, and she'll come to shul in 5 minutes. And then the Kedushas Hayoim once she's arrived. So there's a Gemara in Eruvin which asks, why don't we make Kiddush on Yom Kippur? For Yom Kippur by night, before it becomes dark, before sunset, like in summer we make Kiddush early. So why don't we make also a Kiddush for Yom Kippur early? And Gemara answers, but if you say by Kiddush, you say Shechianu, and you say Shechianu Lizman Hazeh, therefore it's become Yom Kippur. You won't be able to drink the wine. All right, so coming back to this lady, so she wanted to get in the car. So it's this idea of benching licht, when the condition not to be Mekabel Shabbos is condoned in exceptional circumstances, not in regular, but exceptional. The general minhag is Mekabel Shabbos. So I felt it was justified, but I told her, don't say Shechianu. Okay. Now, what we have in Shulchan Aruch over here, this is, as I say in Siman, this is in Siman Reish Samach Gimel. Here, the Alter Rebbe is discussing a woman who has some very important activity on Friday night, and so she wants to bench licht without being Mekabel Shabbos. So the Alter Rebbe brings here an idea that how about if she will light on conditions she's not Mekabel Shabbos, Ozai Tadlik, she will, I'm reading where I'm pointing, Ozai Tadlik or Tavorich, Betasne, she'll make a stipulation that she's not Mekabel Shabbos. And then Alter Rebbe adds this line. You can only make this stipulation. I'm lighting, not Mekabel Shabbos, Ela imkein habal yikabel olov Shabbos miyad somuch lehadlokos. It's only acceptable to light with not being Mekabel Shabbos if the husband will be Mekabel Shabbos. Since she is not Mekabel immediately, so because she's going to the mikveh, she's going to chasna. So if the husband is not Mekabel immediately, so we'll have to put out the candles and light them again close to Kabbalah Shabbos. To light candles and nothing's happened, no Kabbalah Shabbos, shortly thereafter is unacceptable. That's the word which the Alter Rebbe says here. So now, in the Kuntras Achren, the Alter Rebbe discusses this, and he says this idea of lighting in the husband and on a condition, etc. The Mogen Avraham misses this out. He doesn't mention this tikkun because tzorach lekabel Shabbos miyad. She's going to a chuppah. What's the point of her lighting? She has to be Mekabel Shabbos right away, even with it tonight. Now then he brings a word of how long a delay could be thereafter. So he says, "Sheshoyet litzlis da koton miyad lav davke take it from miyad elale alter." The Alter Rebbe introduces here a very interesting deal. We know the word miyad means immediately. As you know, the word immediate, the middle letters of immediate is mem yud dalet. So you have immediate, that's miyad. Then we have a word la'alter. La'alter means promptly. The Alter Rebbe now picks up, and there's a take from miyad. There's immediate, right now. And then there is la'alter, very soon. Very soon. So what's the difference? Well, this can be a couple of minutes. And he mentions here about roasting a fish, a small piece of fish. So now let's take a look. Where's he getting this expression from? So you take a look in the Gemara Shabbos Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, and it has here that they used to have a minig of blowing shofar to announce Shabbos. There was let's say a tower somewhere, a higher space where a person would go on Erev Shabbos, and it was his job to blow shofar to announce Shabbos. It's like a siren. So sheish tkiyas token Erev Shabbos. The first one is for the people out in the fields to hear the siren, to hear the shofar, and they will pack their bags and come in for the fields. The second siren was the people who are local in town. It takes less time for them to get home. Shlishis, the third siren, the shofar sound, that would be to tell people now is the time to light the candles. They used to wear tefillin the whole day. Shabbos, you don't want to wear tefillin. So the third one was the alert sign to take off your tefillin. Here comes the crucial part. And then there's a pause, the amount of time it takes to roast a small fish. Or the time it takes to put some bread, stick it into the oven. And the last three are in succession. So what we're seeing here is, after Hadlokas Haneir, there is still a pause of time to be able to roast a dag cotton, a small piece of fish, or small fish. And only then is it Kabbalah Shabbos by the next set of years. So now we can see that although there is the concept that you should be Mekabel Shabbos right after, but this has to be understood, not miyad, take it from miyad, but it means alter soon. All right. How long is soon? So now the Alter Rebbe says, Mikol Makoim shiur zeh hochul harbe miriviyasho. This must be much less than a quarter of an hour. There's a din of how long when you salt meat. So how long is the minimum for the salting of meat? So the minimum is the amount of time it takes if it would be put up to roast. Shiur tzliya, the shiur melicha is shiur tzliya. The amount of time for the minimum time for salting is the amount of time it would take to roast this piece. How long is the minimum in minutes? So the shiur there is hiluch mil, 18 minutes. Perhaps 24 minutes. I'm going to go into that. But meanwhile, you have, he says, and that's talking about could be a big chunk of meat. And nevertheless, it can be roasted in 18 minutes, 24 minutes. You can roast a whole big piece of meat. So a small piece of fish, a cotton must be much less than the shiur tzliya of a large piece of meat. On that basis, the Alter Rebbe says, if so, even though we have a permission of a pause, it doesn't have to be miyad mamish, take it from miyad, but it has to be the alter. And how long is the alter? He uses a language, pochus harbe miriviyasho, much less than a quarter of an hour. Very interesting. So meanwhile, what I'm going to suggest here, that just like in the dinim of Kiddush b'mokim suda, the Alter Rebbe, just like in the dinim of Hadlokas Neiris, the Alter Rebbe has introduced that there's a concept of double altar, and that is Pochos Harbe Miriviyasho. So let's say it's 10 minutes. So therefore, when we come back to Kiddush b'mokim suda, and there's a din, it has to be that you should be eating la'alter after Kiddush, I'm going to take the liberty of importing the definition of la'alter from Siman Reish Samach Gimel to Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, and to say that the shiur of la'alter is approximately 10 minutes. As I say, most of us don't have that patience to wait after Kiddush till we make Hamoitzi in any case, or to have Mezainas by a Kiddush. Now, okay, so that's just a Kiddush of the Alter Rebbe. This now in the Sefer Shmos Shabbos Halocho, he suggests that this idea that that the wife is lighting near Shabbos al Tanai, and then the husband is Mekabel Shabbos. So he says it's imperative that someone at home is Mekabel Shabbos. If it's not there, so let's say another member of the family or a guest, is Mekabel Shabbos. But if you read further, I didn't put it on the screen. If you read further in this Kuntres Achrin, in Siman Reish Samar Gimel Ois Beis, later on he discusses the dynamics of the mitzvah of Adlokas Neiris. That really, here's an interesting story. She is making the bracha, and he's Mekabel Shabbos. So he says, Alter Rebbe explains, because really Hadlokas Neiris is a mitzvah on the Balabos. It's really his mitzvah. He's paying for it. It's his. He's got it, like he pays for the mezuzah. He has to pay for the neiris. It's his mitzvah. Novos Chazal, in this particular case, they gave the mitzvah to the balas habayis, so the wife should be lighting, but it's really his mitzvah. Therefore, it's legitimate that his Kabbalas Shabbos, it's really his Adlokas Neiris. So according to this understanding, it's only the husband's Kabbalas Shabbos will kind of allow for her wife to not be Mekabel Shabbos, because he's Mekabel Shabbos with her bracha. But for just another person in the house to be Mekabel Shabbos, that doesn't necessarily connect with the fact that she has lit Neiris al Tanai. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Covering the shelyad when we put on the tefillin. So I think we went through this some time back, a couple of years ago. And I see in my notes, it's told us Tafshin Pei Aleph. We discussed this. So we have two issues here. One is about whether the tefillin should be covered when we're wearing the tefillin. So most from a Yidden will have their sleeve down, covering their shelyad. And we have the Gemara here, Gemara Menoches, where it says actually that although it says l'chol la'ois, that means that you can see here, Rav Ashi was once sitting in the presence of Ameimer, and he had some wound on his arm, and as a result, he hadn't covered it over properly, and so his tefillin shelyad were visible. So the Rav Ashi says to Ameimer, don't you subscribe to the idea that the tefillin shelyad should be covered? It means to identify where on the arm, where on the hand. After all, the Posuk says al yodcha or yodecha, so it could be on your palm. So we learned from this earlier in this Gemara that the place which is more covered, more usually the upper arm is covered, and therefore that's the place where the tefillin belong. But it doesn't mean that it's imperative that the tefillin should be covered. Here, the Alter Rebbe brings this whole discussion, and he says this word that it may be a case where a person has a bandage and they still put on the tefillin on top of the bandage, in that case they have to cover it, but otherwise not. If you remember, I remember that the Rebbe, a couple of things. I remember Reb Sadia Liberov, Olav Shalom, putting on his tefillin, and he would pull down his sleeve on his shiur before he put on the shel-rosh. And this is actually in the Sefer Ashkafta the Rebbe is described that the Rebbe Rashabi used to do like this. So it looks like the idea of l'chol ha'os is so important that even before putting on the shel-rosh, they already made a point they should be covered up. I heard that in the earlier years when the Rebbe had arrived in America, so someone saw him struggling to pull down his sleeve after putting on the shiur before the shel-rosh. And this person was megale to the Rebbe. In America, there's something called short-sleeved shirts. And from then on, the Rebbe wore short-sleeved shirts, which you can see in the pictures that the tefillin are partly covered. But we wear the shiur, there's a protective cover, a plastic or cardboard cover. So the previous Rebbe did not wear that cover when he was davening. He just had the tefillin as they were. And the Rebbe did. There's a concern if you don't use a cover, then by wear and tear, it will spoil the squareness of the tefillin, the cube. The Rebbe did wear this thing, and it looks like from the people who know what was going inside, the Rebbe would put on this cover before putting on the shel-rosh. And my svara is that there is this concept of, although it doesn't have to be covered, but there seems to be a hidur in it being covered, l'chol ha'os. And so who says it has to be with the sleeve? Perhaps it's even with the plastic cover. That's also yayotza the inyan of l'chol ha'os. But then the question, so that's why the tefillin is covered later. Question is, why during the brocha do we make a point of covering? So here he brings this is in the Piskei Tshuvos, he brings from the Sharet Tshuva, from Avraham Azulai, this is the grandfather of the Chidah, sheyesh medaktikim, now those who particular, lahafil betalas al azroya, to darken, in other words, to cover over the talus, over the arm when they put on tefillin. We find various tzaddikim would also do so because of tznius. So it seems to be, since we say that l'chol ha'os means that the upper arm is normally covered, so it follows that for hilchas tznius, you shouldn't be making a brocha when you're exposed in a not tzanua way. And therefore, that's the minig, whether bochrim with a jacket, with the right side of the jacket, or in Geman with the talus. So when we make the brocha, so the arm is covered. And then later, after you've put them on, then you pull down the sleeve a little bit. It should be mostly covered. Let's move on to a question which two people, somehow, b'shgacha pratis, asked the same question last week. Is it okay to take Shnitzel from the fridge on Shabbos morning and to put it on the plug-in hot plate, the blech? So to explain what's the question here, the Shnitzel is mevushal kol tzorcha, and therefore it's no problem of bishul achabishul because it's dry. If it be liquid, to reheat liquid is a no-no, because by liquid we say yesh bishul achabishul, which means that it is considered, reheating it is considered cooking. But with a dry food, once it's fully cooked, so ein bishul achabishul, so reheating is not called cooking. Then there's a concept of nira kemavash. So what's the problem of putting dry food on the stove? Nira kemavash. So then you could argue, well, no one cooks on a hot plate. Our plug-in hot plates, or the more traditional sheet of tin over the stove, that's not a normal way of cooking. It's not nira kemavashal. So therefore, there is a good argument to say it's not mavashal, because it's already mavushal. And it's not nira kemavashal because this is not a normal way of cooking. Therefore, it should be okay to put the Shnitzel on the blech. That's the svaras. And let's see what Rav Forkash writes over here. This is from the Sefer Shabbos Halocho, Perek Yud, Ois Yud Daled. Rabim HaPoskim. There are many who rule that you're not allowed to place on Shabbos on the electric plate to place food there. Just like you wouldn't put on the blech, as he discussed in previous paragraphs. On the other hand, there are migdolei haposkim, there are eminent authorities who say that you are allowed to. And therefore he says, if there's a tzorich as negeya for Einik Shabbos, one can rely on that head. L'chatchila yania, you should place on the plata, you should put an inverted dish, and you should put the food which you want to warm up. We're talking about dry food, yeah? Chas v'sholom kol, wet, not liquid. We're talking about dry food. They put it on a upside down a dish, something like that. So therefore, it's a little bit more removed from the hot plate. So there are materium, and if there's a need, one can rely on that. The general minig is not to, but with a upside down dish, that would solve the problem. Okay, let's move on. So we have here about bringing food to the table. So in addition to the challah, we have on Shabbos, we have fish and salads, etc. Should those foods, is it okay for those foods to be brought before Kiddush, or is there a hidur? Yeah, it's not talking about a din here, we're talking about a hidur. Is a hidur to bring those foods only after Kiddush? It can be before Hamoit, we talk about Kiddush. So now we have here as a Tosfos in Psochim Kuf Omed Beis, She'ei mevi'in es hashulchan ela im kein Kiddush. That it says there about bringing the table only after Kiddush. Now, it says in Gemara, Tosfos asked in Shabbos Kuf Yutes about the two Malochim coming Friday night to check out what's going on at home. And if he finds the table all nice and set, so then he says that Brocho, and it should be the same next week. So he answers that the table is prepared, yeah, but it's in the other room. They're going to, the servants will bring it in after Kiddush. Then Tosfos says that nowadays we have instead of little tables by each place, we have a large table, and everyone sits around one big table. And it's not really practical to start bringing in the table after Kiddush. That would be too much of a to do between Kiddush and the Suda, it's connection with the previous discussion, yeah? And therefore, we are accustomed to cover with a cloth. And he quotes from the Sheiltos, the reason for covering is so that now, as if when you make Kiddush, there's no food yet, or nothing visible. Then you make Kiddush, Mekadosh Shabbos, now we can honor Shabbos, now we've got food, so we can uncover the bread. So that's one reason why we cover the bread, so that you should be evident that the food is for celebrating Shabbos. Then there's another Tosfos, I didn't bring the whole on the screen. There's another reason for covering the chalas, a maisa with the mon, that the mon didn't come down on Shabbos, and therefore we cover the chalas with a cloth. So here we have also, particularly in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. So here you have it. What does it say here? The table is the food is ready, but it's brought to the table after Kiddush. It should be evident it's brought done on covered Shabbos. And if it's brought before, it should be before Kiddush, then to cover it with a cloth, as if it's not there until after Kiddush. So it should be evident that it's been brought to covered Shabbos. And then he goes on to say, this is in those times when they had small tables, but nowadays we have big tables, and therefore it's custom to bring the table that we have the bread there before and to cover it. So this idea whether the salad has to be brought later is not really spelt out clearly, because this is talking about the chalas primarily. Well, and then we'll just take a look in the Piskei Teshuvos. He brings here that also the other tzorchei hasuda, also the other provisions for the meal, the fish and then the salads also. It's not a rigid halacha. It's a recommendation. It's preferable to bring them after Kiddush. If they were before, there's a svara to cover them. I see someone's put on the chat something that they were covered in dew. Okay, let's move on. Right. So now the question here is about the name which with a minute to say a posuk at the end of Shmoneh Esrei of one's own, which has the beginning and end letters correspond to the beginning and the end letters of one's own name. The question is, there's also an alternative if you have a posuk which has your name in the posuk. So now, in various sidurim, they've got lists of psukim. I didn't manage to do my homework on this adequately. There are in the Chabad Siddur, the annotated edition, which was published in Tov Shin Samach Gimel. So there they included a list of psukim. Now, I was particularly asked about the name Noach. In other Sidurim, it says, and then in the Kahos Siddur, it has a posuk from Yeshua, which is talking about the Gevulos of Eretz Yisrael, and it's Negbo. First word is Negbo, and the last word is Mizrach. It's a very technical posuk, and that's the posuk, the only posuk in Tanakh which starts with a nun and ends with a ches. And so now I was asked which one would be preferable: the posuk which doesn't have the end and first and last letters, but it has your name, or the one which has your name, So which is preferable? My feeling, particularly in that situation, was actually that posuk I found rather irrelevant, if we can't say such a thing. With a posuk Noach Ish Tzadik is something I think a beautiful posuk. I wanted to trace back this whole thing. Now, where's the earliest mention of this whole minhag? This earliest mention is about 50 years, 70 years after the Arizal, in the early Tov years, Tov Nun, or a bit earlier. So here we have a sefer called Ben Zion. So he writes Besefer. I don't know what the Rosh Tevis is. In the sefer Tov Reish Aleph, he quotes from Rav Hirtz. Now, Rav Hirtz, this I do have. There's a siddur called Siddur Rav Hirtz, which was published in Tihingen in the year Shin Chof, I think. At any rate, and I looked there, I couldn't find it, but he writes that in the name of Rav Hirtz, that one should say there to say a siman for your posuk for your name, and his name was Hirtz. Hirtz means a deer, but he would say a posuk for Naphtali, because the name Hirsch is usually kind of connected to the name Naphtali Hirsch, because of the Brocho of Naphtali Ayala Shlucha. So he would say the posuk Nidvois Pirit Seino Umashpatecha Lamdeini, which is interesting also to comment that if a person has got a authentic their official name and then they've got a nickname, so the posuk which they say should be of their official name rather than their nickname, which also is becomes complicated because now a lot of us the nickname has become an indigenous part of the name, which we're going to have to think about carefully. Right. So this is one of the earliest sources. Well, he's already quoting Rav Hirtz. They often refer to the Shalom, and it's not in the Shalom. Then there's a sefer called Kitzur Shalom. Kitzur Shalom, this does appear there in certain prints. So there's a letter of the Rebbe published also in Shulchan Menachem, and it has there that he sees a reference to Kitzur Shalom. He can't find it there. It's only in certain prints of the Kitzur Shalom. I must diverge for a second. The joke is said about the Chayei Odom. He quoted, he chose the name for his sefer very wisely, because other people write for him, and then people make a kitzur, and you can't necessarily rely on the quality of the mekatzer. So he gave a name Chayei Odom. No one's going to give a name Kitzur Chayei Odom, which means the shortening of a person's life. For that matter, Chochmas Odom is shortening a person's chokhmah. It's not a very clever thing. So now, so you have the Sefer Kitzur Shalom, and again, I haven't done too much research, but I do have this frustration that not everything in the Kitzur Shalom appears in the Shalom. Kitzur Shalom is not necessarily a faithful abbreviated Shalom. It's good to Zachen, but it's not. Okay, so there's a section towards the end of the Shalom, Kitzur Shalom, sorry, the print in Amsterdam, print from the year Tov base. And then we're going to read this. Yodua, it's mentioned earlier, he had discussed about Maseches Gehenim and about the idea of Chibot HaKever, which means the body being thrown around in the grave. That the wicked, they don't know their name when they are in the grave, and they are beaten in a cruel way. And Misha Oimer Bechayo Kol Yoim Posuk Echot. A person during his lifetime will say a posuk which begins with his name, with the same letter as his name, and ends with with his name. That means so. Then the Hainu Oisi Hashem She'oila Le'imah Sefer Torah. We mean the official name, which She'oila Le'Sefer Torah Shehu Shem HaKodesh. It goes into detail. The person is known as Itchik, but he's called to the same Yitzchok. So he should take a posuk which begins with a yud and ends with a kuf, and so on. Someone Misha Shmoi Nimtza Posuk Atzmoi. A posuk has the word Shalom or Don or Reuven. She'ein Tzorich L'Sayim B'Soif Shmoi. It doesn't matter if it does end with a nun, etc. That doesn't matter. And one who says that this posuk is a scholar, he shouldn't forget his name. And then he quotes the Sefer Ben Sion, which you saw on the previous page. In the Sefer, was that right? That was Sefer Ben Sion, yeah. The Sefer Ben Sion, he has a list of names of psukim, of names and psukim. And so the publisher of this Kitzur Shalom says, I'm going to do the same thing, do you a favor. I'm going to copy out the psukim which are over there, which are said at the end of Shmoneh Esrei, before you rotzen, at the end of Shmoneh Esrei. Okay. So then he has for Avraham, he has indeed a posuk which he says either the posuk Atuhu al Shem Elikim, Samto Shmei Avraham, or a posuk Ani Hashmu Shmi Shalti Lepsilim. So it seems to be a bit contradictory. He just said it's better if it has your name, but then he gives an alternative which doesn't have your name. It just starts and ends with an aleph. So that's interesting. I mean, my name is Levi Yitzchok, and I say a posuk Yitzim Mechoshech V'Tamoves Moshe Sem Yonatik. I'm sure there are dozens, if not hundreds, of psukim, nice psukim, which have the word Yitzchok, and yet generally we keep just saying a posuk which begins, with this begins and ends with the same letters. So we don't necessarily opt for a posuk which mentions the name without it matching beginning and end. That seems to be the general thing. But yeah, nevertheless, coming back to this name Noach, I felt that the posuk, which is this other posuk, as I said, I didn't find it very inspiring. And whereas you take a posuk which has got a message to it, I find it more meaningful. There is in the Sefer Shulchan Menachem, as I mentioned, there's a lot of discussion about this, about the posuk, and Minhag Chassidim is to say the posuk of the Rebbe. When that crucial moment in Chibot HaKever, one also a chassid would want to have to remember the Rebbe's name to be there with him. And the Rebbe in that letter indeed mentions about the Frierdiker Rebbe using the posuk Yitzim Mechoshech V'Tzamoves. Now here he mentions about if you have a nickname. So as it says, Chenach. Chanoich is the Hebrew, and then in Yiddish it became Henach. So he says you don't have to say a posuk for Henach, only for Chanoich. Now, so my question is, I mentioned last night in the shul, my father's name was named after Rebbe Ashab, Doiv Ber. Now, bear is a translation of Dov. Do you have to say a separate Posuk for bear, or it's just a Posuk for Dov? So that I don't know. I'm sure there are Chassidim who have a Mesorah about that, and I'd be happy to share. If you tell me what you have Mesorah on that, I'll be happy to share with other people. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so now question, very relevant, very current type of question today. You want to use a business, a service, whatever it may be. So you go into their website, and on the website there is reviews of other users. There's a whole parsha that you can get false reviews also. Right? There's a whole industry, I understand, of somehow improving your ratings, etc. Reviews. But here's a question. I used the service of a Jewish company. They gave me a rotten service, and am I allowed to put down a review which they deserved? And of course, it's going to protect the next customer. They'll see what to expect. They'll go to a different business. So is that allowed? And if that's not allowed because it's Lashon Hara, so then am I allowed to read reviews bichlal because it's Lashon Hara? So there's a general principle in Lashon Hara that if it's l'toyeles, if there is a constructive purpose for it, I'm not going to go into all the details. It's not on my fingertips, but generally there's a halacha l'toyeles. So to read reviews in order to make your mind up whether to use this hotel or not, or to use this installation company, whatever it may be. So you can read the reviews because that's lotealis. But what about writing the review? Yeah, so it's a lotealis to protect other people. So I've got here on the screen from Chofetz Chaim, Lashon Hara, Klal Yud, Ois Yud Aleph. And he writes to be very careful not to allow yourself to tell other people how I had a geschäft with so-and-so, how he ripped me off, he cheated me in this way, and he was insulting, he hurt me, he embarrassed me, etc. Even if you know that it's true, and even feel if you'll have the heter which is mentioned before, which is about the idea of toyalis, because your intention at this moment is not for toyalis. Your intention is not to protect other people. Rather, rather your kavana is you want to vent. You want to tell people this. It's a kind of revenge, so to speak, that this person that gave you such a horrible service and behaved so nasty to you. Therefore, you want to kind of settle accounts with them, and therefore he said, and the more people hear about this, the better. So your motive here. So although it's true that your negative review would be a toyeles, but your motive for doing so is most likely not the toyeles, but to vent your frustration, and therefore that would not be acceptable. So just now, go ahead. Right, the next question which we have, which I don't have anything on the screen, is about sending an unfinished Sefer Torah with a regular courier service. So if a Sefer Torah we treat with enormous respect, and when it's transported, let's say, if someone wanted to take a Sefer Torah on a plane, they wouldn't put it in luggage, they would take it on hand luggage, and if it's a big Sefer Torah, let's say you can get one of these sports holdalls, a long bag, and arrange that you should be able to put it in. Of course, you're going to have special permission because it's bigger than the regular dimensions, but you make arrangements in advance that you should be able to, and then you take it with, and you put it in the overhead lockers, and so it means paying a bit extra to go earlier. Right. So but here's an unfinished Sefer Torah. In other words, they're going to celebrate a Hachnos Sefer Torah with the sea, and they're going to make a sofer. So it's unfinished. So then it does not have Kiddush Sefer Torah. Then technically it would be permitted to wrap it and put it in a put it in luggage, etc. That or in a courier service, that would be permitted. Right. Let's move on. Someone asked just now in the chat whether he's allowed to put up a good review on this shiur. So that's not a question of Lashon Hara, it's a Lashon Torah. That's not a shiur altogether. But I am biased, so let's move on. Hagber and Galila. Now, there is brought in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Mem Aleph. Very often we have this question about giving aliyas to two immediate relatives, two brothers, father and son. And then there's also, even if it be a zayda and a grandson, if it's ben achar ben, not a ben achar bas. So we don't give aliyas one straight after the other. That's brought in the Ramo, idea of Ein Hora. What about, so just last week, someone asked me, I was given the aliyah of Chazak, and he had bought maftir, he wanted to give it to my son to give him maftir. So it says clearly that Ramo, even for shvi and maftir, also you wouldn't give a father and son one after the other. There may be a difference on Yom Tov, etc., when you switch Sefer Torah, but generally, no, one wouldn't. So what about, here the question is about Hag ben Glila, father and son, to have one after to have the Hag ben Glila one next to the other. So that's not written in Shulchan Aruch nor in the Ramo. So in the Piskei Teshuvos in Siman Kuf Mem Aleph, he writes that if the custom is not to call them up by name, then that would be okay. If it's normal if they do call them up by the name, then one should avoid calling a father and son to do a Hag ben Glila. I just want to point out also what I noticed by my father, Shalom, and generally in the Minhag Olam, you don't say Ya'amoid for Hagba. Ya'amoid is for Aliyah. Aliyah, the Torah use the word Ya'amoid, but for Hag ben Glila would be, if you are calling them up by name, it would be Mishabeirach, Mashvusha Yale. The same thing with two brothers. Thank you. Yes. He says here, even if you're going to not call them up by name, but if it's standard meaning to call them up by name, then it would be something to be avoided. Okay, let's move on. Right. Might finish a little bit early. There is a Malava Malka here in Hendon. That's why you can see there's a different background if you noticed. So making the shiurs from Hendon tonight. Let's take a look. One last question then for tonight, and that is about teaching children. So there's Malamdim discussing with one another, and they're learning Kiddush Shulchan Aruch, and they have a whole series of details. If you come late, so then to be able to daven with the minyan, so then you can skip this, and and priorities of skipping, and then to teach this, and let's talk about a Chabad Cheder. Generally in Chabad, this isn't followed. So then, should we be learning it with the children and then say that we don't follow? That's an interesting question. How wise is it to teach children something and then say, well, we're not noeg like that? That's an interesting chinuch question. And that's one of the values of the new Kiddush Shulchan Aruch with the Minhagei Chabad, that you have kind of the Minhagei Chabad is there at the bottom of the page, and so it's rather than saying, oh, well, we're not like what we just learned, which itself is a bit kishvach, yeah. So here's the letter of the Rebbe. We'll read this carefully. This letter is to Rabbi Dubov Olav Shalom, who was a mashkiach in Manchester Yeshiva. Rosh Yeshiva was Rabbi Segal, and Rabbi Dubov was a mashkiach. I'm sure there were other staff members also. And so he asked the question. And the Rebbe says, in reference to you, in answer to your question, there are lads who tend to come late. And if you shouldn't, if you won't tell them to skip the karbonos before hoidu, then they won't be able to daven with the tzibur. So what should you do? So they're not late for hoidu, but they come to time for hoidu, but they haven't said karbonos. So what should we do? Should we tell them to skip, etc.? So a very diplomatic answer. Let's read this carefully. Hine yodua maimer azal ezuhu chochom horoyas hanoilad. Who is the wise person who can foresee the future? You can see how things will develop. Who shayich b'chol inyan ve'inyan. That's relevant everywhere. And here too. Now, the Av Shehadin is clear that you should skip. Then he gives a sefer, b'sefer Sharit Tefillah, that Rabbi Yaakov Rekeach. There's a sefer from Rabbi Yaakov Rekeach who lived about 120 years ago. On the margin of the Rebbe's Siddur, in the Shara Koilo, right near the beginning, the Rebbe gives a reference to this sefer Sharit Tefillah. So that's how I remember. I once looked it up. At any rate, I looked this thing also up once. He brings Tzadik Aleph Dayish Svirul Hukain. The Sharit Tefillah, Rabbi Yaakov Rekeach, brings 91 sources that you should skip when you're running late to the Kebal to down with the minyan. So the din is Boro Shemedalgin. So, having said that, let's go for a moment. The Kaf HaChaim brings from other sources that one shouldn't skip because there's a Seder. So that's probably why the Rabbi Yaakov Rekeach went to the effort of bringing all of those sources. Avol yesh liros, but Rebbe is saying, yes, there is a simple halacha. When you're coming late, you skip, and to be able to daven with the min. Avol yesh liros es hanoilad ubemeshech zman kotzer. One has to be wary to see what's going to develop, and especially if it's in the short term. We've seen this quite tangibly. The permission to skip may be taken from a yad. If you can skip, that means it's not so important. First thing we'll say, skip karbanos beforehand. Then the next stage is come later. Okay, so you skip parts of Sukkot Zimra. I can skip here, and once you start getting into the that skipping is illegitimate, then it becomes. The Rebbe is saying we could see this is the tendency. It develops more and more. Especially, you're asking about young boys who are very impressionable, and so then you don't want to give them this feeling that you can that parts of davening are dispensable. Therefore, practically speaking, of course, we cannot issue a ruling contrary to the din. Very, very interesting. Try to find a way that the boys shouldn't even know that there's a heter to skip. So in other words, don't learn the material. So then they shouldn't go, oh, we can allow to skip. Better they shouldn't know. Who al derech maimer azal omro Torah chalel ol Shabbos achas k'dei sheyishmeir acher Shabbos es harbe. You have a Gemara on Shabbos about pikuach nefesh to violate this Shabbos, so that he will keep many Shabboses. So, this one, Chal Shabbos Achas, so that someone else should be able to, you're Machal Shabbos, that someone else should be able to have many Shabboses in his future life. So you tell Reuven to be Machal Shabbos, so that Shimon should have many Shabboses. How much more so in our case, where we're talking about the same person. So the Rebbe seems to be saying it's true that the boy, if we don't tell him to skip, so he's not going to daven with the minyan. But perhaps by that in itself will spur him to that next time he'll make sure to be on time. He should be able to say karbonos in time, etc. Whereas if you tell him that you can skip, the Rebbe is worried about the of course you can argue the other way around. You can argue that he'll get used to davening without the minyan. But then if he's going to say every word, he hasn't gained anything by skipping. His Yetzirah is happy, he's skipped a whole lot of stuff. Whatever, upon him, this seems to be quite clear in this letter. The Rebbe is guiding more that not to teach this halacha to the Talmidim, and they get older, they'll learn about it, and then they'll deal with it as they get older. That's my understanding. All right, with this, I'll wish you all a good voch. Should be a week of Besuras Tevis in the Yeshuas, Kal Yisrael, the in Eretz Yisrael, the hostages and the soldiers should be safe, and we should have a Geula Shlemo with Mashiach Tzidkenu b'Meheru Yameinu Mamash. There is a svara of that. Yeah, you're right. There's some that if you skip, you should be making up the parts afterwards. Yeah, I don't know how much that would work with the Talmidim and the yeshivas. They have to go then afterwards to breakfast. For some, it's not so poshut. All right, Agutavach.